Hi, you must be Mr. Jones. So nice to meet you. I'm Miss Martinez and I'm Susie's teacher this year. I understand you'd like to go over Susie's test scores to get a better understanding of what they mean. I'll be happy to help you with that. Go ahead and have a seat.
Thank you. These test scores are kind of confusing. There's just so much information.
Well, let's go over it together. First of all, the test that Susie took was the Iowa Test of Basic Skills and Cognitive Abilities. She took this test back in January. This test is a norm reference test, which means that Susie's scores are compared to a national sample of students who are also in 4th grade, which make up the norm group. The test results are completely confidential and are a way of gauging how Susie is doing in comparison to other children of her approximate age and grade level around the country. The top portion of the test shows Susie's scores as how they compare to other children nationally. The bottom portion of the test results are criterion referenced, meaning that Susie's scores are not being compared to anyone else in this portion. Her scores in this portion represent how well she is doing according to the standards for each area tested. We must remember that this test is only one indicator of Susie's achievement, and the results of it must be considered along with what I see her doing in the classroom.
So these scores on the test that Susie took are not her final scores as far as her grades are concerned?
Right. This test is just a snapshot of how Susie was doing on the day she took this test. I also use her accumulated classwork when making any judgments about her grades. Would you like to look over her portfolio? Also, all these tests have a margin of error and cannot show exactly what a student knows.
Then why do the students even have to take these tests? What good are they?
Well, I know these types of tests have gotten a bad rap and are subjected to a lot of criticism, but the reality is that these tests give me a way of comparing what I see in the classroom with another independent source. That helps me to see how on target I am. The test is designed to measure how well your child understands the material taught in class and gives me another way besides my observations in your child's classwork of seeing what areas your child has scored higher or lower in. This many times helps me to confirm that what I am observing in the classroom is accurate. This benefits your child as I can provide supplemental help in areas where Susie may need it and provide enrichment activities in areas where it seems that Susie is performing above average.
No one ever explained the reasoning for these tests to me before. The reason a child takes these is much clearer now.
The whole test or battery is made up of many subtests. For example, here on the top left of the first page, you can see that spelling, capitalization, punctuation, and usage and expression are all separate subtests of the elements that make up the language score. The bottom section of the second page is set up the same way as well. As you can see under the Test and Skills heading, the tested skill sets, vocabulary, reading comprehension, spelling, are listed along with their tested components. Reading across the chart, for each component, the total number of items on the test is shown, along with the number of items that your child at least tried to answer. It then shows the percentage that Susie answered correctly, as well as the national average percentage answered correctly. The actual number of questions that Susie answered correctly is her raw score prior to any type of conversion. Any questions so far?
Yes, I noticed that Susie did really well in several areas under tests and skills, such as names and titles, organization of ideas, measurement, single step, read amounts, and history. She made 100 in each of those areas. Do you think she should be tested for Gifted and Talented program?
Well, each of those scores is only one element of a tested area, such as history being only one element of the social studies. So you have to look at all the elements under a certain heading. When you look at all of the elements under the social studies heading, you will notice that when taken together, Susie is doing well, but probably not on the level of Gifted and Talented. However, I am taking note of the areas she is strong in, as I want to encourage her continued interest in learning in those areas by providing appropriate enrichment activities.
Thanks. It sounds good.
Sure. Now let me explain a few more things from the test scores to you. In many places you will see the use of percentages. This does not reflect your daughter's actual grades. What percentages tell you is that if Susie scored in the 75th percentile, such as she did under vocabulary on page 1, she scored higher than 75% of 4th grade students nationally. That percentage coincides with a figure on what is called a bell curve. Let me show you. See the red line? That shows the midpoint on the graph, which is at 50%. From that point, as you move to the left, half of those students did worse than 50%, and moving to the right, half 50% did better. On the bell curve, 50% is average. So if we move over here to 75% on the chart, we can see that Susie scored above average in vocabulary. And as I stated, all tests have a degree of error, which is referred to as a standard error measurement. For this test, the degree of error was 4, meaning that if Susie scored a 75% as she did in vocabulary at the top of page 2, her actual score after accounting for error would be either 4 points lower or 4 points higher than 75%. So we would say that we have confidence that her actual ability lies somewhere between 71 to 79%, which is represented by the black band, shown on the right-hand side, with the white diamond in the middle representing the tested score of 75%.
Wow, that's a lot of information. I'm really glad you're able to explain this one to me.
It really is a lot of information, which is part of why these tests are useful, as I explained to you earlier. Let me go over just a few more things. If you look here on page 1 at the bottom graph, there are something called stanines, which are represented right here on our bell curve. These are broken into stanines from 1 to 9. The numbers from 1 to 3 represent below average figures. Those from 4 to 6 represent average, and those from 7 to 9 represent above average scores. This scoring measure represents a broad range of actual scores and is not as specific as the percentage scores, but it is used as a very general reference. So Susie scored at the average mark in quantitative and nonverbal skills with a 5 and 6 under cognitive abilities, and scored above average with a 7 in verbal skills. Also, whenever you hear anything referred to as a scaled score, it just means that your child's raw score, which as I explained is the actual number of questions that they have answered correctly, has been converted through the use of a formula to another form, such as a percentage, stanine, Z or T score, or a grade equivalent score, in order that it may be meaningfully compared to other scores nationally. So here on page 2 of the test at the top, where it shows SS, that is your child's standard score, and to the far right it is converted to the NPR, or national percentile rank, which can then be compared to other national scores and can be shown on the bell curve. The NCE is the normal curve equivalent, which is the red line on the bell curve, which represents the average score 50%, which I kind of touched on earlier. Is there anything else that you're unsure about?
Actually, I do have one more question. I noticed that on page 1, under GE, or grade equivalent, my daughter scored a 5 or more in almost all the areas, but she's only in 4th grade. Should she be skipped up a year?
No, actually she has not done any work other than 4th grade work, and those numbers are basically just a way of comparing how much she has grown in a certain area over the course of the year and from year to year. I do want to let you know that I carefully consider all of the information that I gather and that is given to me about your child, and use that information to make instructional choices or changes in order to help further your child's learning. As we discussed earlier, I will encourage the areas in which your child is showing above average achievement by offering enrichment activities. At the same time, I can see from the information at the bottom of page 2, there are areas which we will need to help Susie, especially with the elements under spelling and capitalization. I will give verbal reminders in class when capitalization of a word is necessary, such as at the beginning of a sentence or in the case of a proper name. And we'll write out a list of the words that I see that Susie is continually unable to spell correctly. I will give her that list as well as send one home to you. Please help her to learn the correct spellings of those words, and remember to encourage and remind her in the use of proper punctuation, capitalization. I feel that overall Susie is doing well, and with continued effort on both our parts, she shouldn't have any real problems. Do you have any other concerns about this at this time?
No, I think you've answered everything I was wondering about. I appreciate your time.
No problem. That's part of what I'm here for. I'm going to give you a handout that kind of briefly restates some of the items on the test that we discussed today, just in case you need it later on. It was so nice to meet you. Please take care of yourself and remember that I'm here if you have any questions or concerns in the future. We're in this together. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.